Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're going to do a little bit of tree maintenance in the garden this morning. We've got several interesting trees or plants that we've turned into trees, like shrubs that we've limbed up into trees, and each of them need a little bit of maintenance. Not only is it a good time toward the end of February, beginning of March, but also I can see into most of these. Most of them are deciduous trees, and I can really get in here and examine what's going on in them before they leaf out. Once they leaf out, I could still do a little pruning on them, but it would be much harder to execute anything you wanted to be doing. This is a Golden Falls redbud, and if you follow the channel for any length of time, I've called it the cousin it tree before. It's got these big, beautiful gold heart-shaped leaves on it, and it weeps all the way down to the ground. It's very fast growing. It's abnormally fast growing, really. I can lift the limbs up off the ground multiple times a year. It just grows down to the ground, and it'll just skirt right across the ground if we leave it like that. Again, about 2 or 3 times a season, I'm just coming in here and cutting all the branches that are, hanging down that far off. By doing that little bit of pruning, though, I encourage a lot of branching up here in the top. Any pruning you're doing on a plant, you're probably going to be waking up dormant buds on that thing, and then it can turn into a mess of lots of, think about this as suckering, like ground suckering, but it's happening up here because it's a weeping tree. So you got all of these new small branches initiating, and it's really too many, and so they're crossing up with one another. This thing blows around in the wind quite a bit. These big leaves allow it to move around, and you can just hear it, all of that rubbing from all of those stems. So I'm going to get in here, prune a few of these out. I'm not going to go crazy on it, but I definitely want to thin some of these out that are clearly rubbing up against one another, lift up the bottom of it. But the first thing I want to do is retie it to a stake here. This tree has to be permanently staked. Since day one, this thing has been trying to lean over in various directions. And so I've basically put a solid pole that is, about a 2-inch diameter fence post that I got at Lowe's, and it was probably 8 feet tall because it's a little over 6 here in the ground, and I've got it tied off to the tree. I can use the stretch tie like this, but this tree is too heavy to really be held up by that, so I'm using I'm going with a heavier duty operation, but it needs to be cut off occasionally and reattached. You can see where I had the other zip tie on it from last year, and the tree doesn't add a lot of diameter real quickly, so it's not really doing any damage over there. I could put some sort of piece of cloth or something around it to prevent it from digging into it, but I'm pretty diligent about cutting it off occasionally and putting another one on. Because this thing will bend over, as soon as I cut it off, I'll go ahead and attach another one up here. These zip ties work pretty well for this, holding up heavier things. Again, I could put some sort of protection on the bark if I was nervous about it cutting into it. But I have to put 2 of these, I guess, what are these? 6-inch zip ties together, and then I'll cut the other one off from last year. And you can see it really hasn't done any damage to it. You can see the mark where it was there, but it's overall no big deal. And I'm actually going to put a second one on here, and again, we put 2 of these zip ties together to get this job done. I'll show you what happens if you leave one of these on too long in a couple of minutes in the video, because we do have one plant that kind of outstripped us paying attention to it last year. And unfortunately, yeah, okay, I got it. Trying to do too many things at once here. Okay, all right. There you go, 2 spots now, it's tied back up. When you're pruning shrubs, typically you can get away with just a few tools, hedge trimmer like this, hedge clipper, and then, a pair of hand pruners and, not much else. Maybe an electric set of shears or gas set of shears if you're doing big hedging or something. When you get into trees, this is when I typically will pull out more of my weapons of mass destruction. We've got a pair of anvil pruners. If there are any dead branches in the tree, it's best to prune them with a pair of anvil pruners. Basically that blade just goes up against a solid piece of metal right there, and it really works well for cutting off dead branches. If you've ever cut dead branches with your good sharp pair of pruners, you'll know it just doesn't want to go through it, and it really dulls them. You know, anytime you're cutting a limb with your regular pruners and it's really resisting you, put them away, you know, and grab something else. You know, I've got a tree saw, and I'll show you my 3-cut method for that I've shown many times the last 6 years on the channel for cutting off a heavier branch on a Vitex in a few minutes. But lots of different tools. Keep in mind your hedge trimmers or your hedge shears have a cutter right down in the bottom of them. They should. You got the blade here, and then right there is a little cupped out place, and it really allows for a lot of leverage to cut slightly larger limbs. So I'll show you that real quick. Right there. Just really easily cuts them off. I used almost no effort there. Of course, it's a tiny branch, I know, but it's incredible how much leverage you get with that little spot versus how much leverage you get trying to use your hands to do similar tasks. So keep that in mind. You do have an extra pair of pruners in your hand, you just didn't know it. Okay, coming up into the top of this tree, the main branches I want to get are the ones that are just laying across another branch. And if, Steph, can you come right here? I want to show you. This is minor right now, but you can see what would happen in the future. This branch has been, these 2 branches have been laying on this spot. And you see where they're doing this. Okay, and it's not that big of a deal right now because the thing is it's not very big. But you can see in the future, obviously that's going to be problematic. So I'll just track this thing. I'm going to go ahead and actually take this entire branch off right there, you know, where this whole piece goes up to the top, because all of these are just laying on stuff all the way down. So I'll come in here above this collar. I want to leave this, you know, this collared area in place. You can see where I've done some other pruning on it in the past, and I just leave a little bit of that collar, but I cut it behind that last bud. It's a good pair of sharp pruners, and this is out of here. It's just been, it was going to wreak havoc in this tree in the future. Those little limbs that were laying on top of it. This one's far enough off right now. I think I'll leave it. This one just runs down through the middle of the plant. Okay, so everything, all the big giant leaves on the outside cover up anything that are hanging right down here in the middle. So I'll track this one back up here and do the same thing. These cut super easy. This redbud wood is pretty weak. And then again, anything that I know in the future is going to end up problematic, I'll go ahead and cut it off now. Really no reason to keep it. If it's actually going to be filling a hole, you know, here's a small one that's going to be filling a hole, but there's a limb beside it that's laying across it. Okay, so now I got the spot. I want to fill this spot, so I'll allow a couple to come down in there. And again, I'm just going to work my way around the tree looking for limbs that just lay over top of other limbs, or, you know, yeah, alternatively, I can cut the one that's under it. I know it's hard to see in this tree, but here's lots of examples over here where I got 2 limbs that are laying on top of one another here. This small, newer one, I'll cut it out from under that one, and I'll leave this heavier one just there. Now it's pretty free to go where it wants to go. This branch right here is going to potentially just continue to wreak havoc, going right down through the middle of all this stuff. Hopefully you can see some of this. There you go. There was a dead branch in there at the same time. There's a lot going on here. Okay, so here's one, runs right down through the middle of the plant. So I'm not even going to be able to see the leaves on it. And it's up under this larger branch rubbing on it. You see that? So I'm going to just come behind it, cut it off clean, and now that spot's kind of wide open. And that's all I'm looking for. Going through and making decisions on which one which one makes sense to come out. If it's one that's hanging down, if I've got 2 rubbing one another, like I do right here, I got 2 branches rubbing one another. Which one makes more sense ultimately to come out of there? I think it's probably the one that hangs down, you know, right through the middle is the one that should come out. So this is a bigger cut. But now, again, there's another spot. If you've got any branches that are just right along the edge in the very middle of the tree, on a weeping tree like this, there's really not a lot of purpose for them. Also, is that branch going to be in your face at some point? Okay, so if it was a regular tree and all the branches were coming out this way, that branch right there is ultimately going to come off anyway. So sometimes I'll just go ahead and get rid of them if it's, you know, while it's dormant. Okay, and I think I may end up doing, you know, cutting a couple little more side branches out of here where they're overlapping like this. Okay, you see I'm just kind of coming across here and just saying, okay, I just have too many. Here's two right here that are right on top of one another. I'll get this small one out of there. Okay, that's probably about all I'll do to it. And then I'm gonna take my head shears and just go around the bottom of this thing and go ahead and lift it up. Redbuds bloom in like the next 2 or 3 weeks. So normally I'd probably wait until after it flowered if it was a heavy flowering variety. But this Golden Falls redbud, I've had about a total of 17 flowers on it in 3 years. Our regular native redbud has tons and tons of flowers on it, and I probably wouldn't be cutting branches off of it right now, but the pollinators absolutely love these when they're in bloom. But that's it. I've lifted up. Of course, I got some cleanup to do, but I've lifted up the bottom of it and gone in here and thinned out the top canopy a bit. And it looks all mean, but ultimately as it leaves out, it'll fill back in. We really filled this Chinese snowball viburnum. I staked it up and tree formed it last year, and it's really on its way. It's actually got flower buds on it right now. But I used, again, you got to pay attention, you know, to how you have these things tied up. You can see how it's cut into the branch. It'll probably be fine. I don't think it's going to be any kind of long-term issue, although it doesn't even want to come out. Now that I'm actually trying to cut it, I may have to use a different. Okay, there it is. Okay, and I'm trying to damage the bark on it too even more, but there it is. Look how bad that is. So make sure you're paying attention. The only reason I didn't come over here and look is because this was just done last summer. This isn't like it's been on there a year or anything. It just grew so fast that it ultimately has dug in really, really quickly because it grew so fast. You know, it's a fast-growing plant, so I definitely won't be using the zip ties to do this again. The tree grows so slow that I can get away with it, but this thing, it's embedded in there. Look at that. That's not good. That is things not to do, okay? And so what I'll do on this one is instead use the zip tie, or the stretch tie, because the stretch tie would have allowed it to stretch out, and that's what it's called, right? This material will allow it to stretch and not dig in. It'll give me some period of time where I'm not having to worry about it. That was definitely amazing how fast that thing added caliper last year. It's only been just a few months. I'll tighten about 3 spots. Again, fast growing things. Stretch tie definitely works. The problem on a bigger tree though is this stuff, there it is. That's the problem on a bigger tree. It's just not strong enough ultimately to hold a big tree up in place. But this little small caliper viburnum, it'll do just fine. This is a Tokyo Tower Chinese fringe tree. We have a great American fringe tree as well, but I also love the Chinese fringe tree. But the Chinese fringe tree gets really, really wide. This variety stays upright and narrow. You can see how kind of fastigiate the branches are. They're straight up on it. It's a grafted tree, and you know, anytime we're talking about grafted trees and talking about tree maintenance, I will look around the graft down there at the bottom where you can see it was grafted onto regular Kyananthus down below it, and the graft looks good. There's no growth coming out below that, so everything looks good there. Make sure we're not burying this the graft. This one was right down near the ground, so it's very, very low. And I want to make sure over time that I'm not burying that. Okay, this I talked about on the red bud. You know, if there's any branches that you're definitely going to take off in the future, I just go ahead and do it now. This branch that's coming off the side that's kind of weeping down, that's low right there, I'm going to go ahead and take it off. And then this branch right here, I want all the, from where the branches break right here going up, all looks great. This one's just the outlier down at the bottom. A good, again, really good sharp pruners. This one is at the max of where this pair of pruners really wants to make a good clean cut. So the tool matters. I've got a couple other larger pairs of tools that I would probably used on that if I didn't quite have the physical strength to go through that and make a good cut. And then it's a matter of looking through here and making sure there's not already some cross branches. When in the future, there are limbs that are coming back in toward the middle. You've got basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or so upright branches, maybe 6. I want most of the branches coming off the side of those to be going out and away from the plant, and not a lot right in here in the middle. In the future, a few of these branches that are coming back in toward the middle will have to come off. I think they're fine for now. This thing's in no hurry. It's not a fast growing tree at all, but I think next year I'll probably get in here and take a few branches off that are clearly going back toward other main branches, but I'll leave it for now. I kind of limbed it up, you know, branches that were clearly going to be in our face or just, you know, obstructing the rest of the garden. I went ahead and took them off, but I'll wait till next year to get in here and do a little bit of surgery. My contorted Tamukiyama Japanese maple that I've contorted over the last, I don't know how many years I've had this plant now, 12, 13, 14 years, something like that. It's got a branch that's in the interior that you can't see when it's leafed out, that I'm going to go ahead and take off of the main trunk. I've just been taking these off over the years, you know, as it covered them up. But that branch, instead of cutting off with my hand pruners like I did on the Tokyo Tower Kyananthus over there, went and got the loppers, which just make a really, really clean, easy cut right there. That leaves a clean wound on it. There are a couple other little small, tiny little branches that are probably crossing other things in here, but you know, if you get, I don't know if the camera can even pick this up, they're just small little branches in here. You know, this one, it comes out from under another stem and goes over the top of another small branch. You know that's going to be a problem in the future, and it's easy to see before the thing leaves out that in the future, some point in the future is going to be problematic. So I'll take a few of those off, kind of make it a little more airy. And that's it. That's all I need to really do. That's amazing how little work these trees actually are if you're staying on top of this type of pruning in the wintertime, you know, and making sure that, you know, air can move through them, limbs aren't rubbing one another, the base of the tree is in good shape, you haven't buried it in too much mulch over the course of time, and that it's ready for the season now. Next up is this Summertime Blues Vitex. We think of Vitex as kind of small ornamental trees. This Summertime Blues variety has kind of a more rangy habit, more shrub-like in its growth. But I have limbed it up into a tree because I like the kind of weepy habit it has, but I just wanted to elevate that weeping habit. I hope some other growers will actually grow the Summertime Blues on a standard like this, on a single trunk, but I think it looks great. It really, a lot of Vitex and crepe myrtles are like this too. Once they get to a certain height, all the flowers are up really tall on the top of the plant. You don't see them as much unless you get a long distance from them. Whereas with this little bit of weeping habit, we get to see the purple flowers, lavender purple flowers all the way around it. So again, I think it's a perfect candidate for nurserymen to be tree forming. One thing to think about on trees is this little bit of pruning that I'm doing on them. If you planting tree varieties that get really big, this little bit of maintenance that you're doing on them while they're small may prevent you from having to hire a professional later to take a limb off after that tree's gotten 40 feet tall, when it would have been really easy just to snip it off when it was little, you know, before it crossed up in through everything else, or, you know, came out at an angle where it was in your face and that kind of thing. There are branches on this thing, because I cut it really hard right here to begin with, I encouraged growth from all kinds of places. So it's had suckers down at the bottom that we've cleaned up, but it's also had some material come off from this original wound and just grow right up through the middle of the plant. Those need to be cut off. Anything that obviously is going to, number one, it can't be seen. Anything that's up in the middle of this plant, you're never going to see it. And number two, it's obviously going to end up crossing with other things in the future. This limb right here came out at such a weird angle. It came such a strange angle right here, and now it's heading back in that way. I'm going to cut it here initially, and I need to probably very gently take a saw and maybe cut that off. But any of these little twiggy things along here that obviously, you know, I don't have any reason to keep them. They're only going to go up through the middle of the tree and cause issues in the future. And again, I can just kind of analyze this all the way up to the top of the tree. You know, there's a branch right here that's just running amok right through the middle of it, heading in a completely different direction than this side. And you know, a little cut right there and it's done. And I'll go through here and continue to kind of lift this thing up a bit in time. Okay, this one branch though right here, I just don't need. I want these two main pieces coming up, and then I don't want them to branch until about here. Okay, ultimately, that's what I want to get. That's the point I want to get to. So I think I'm going to remove this entire branch. Once we get to a branch that's this tall, or this big, I'll use my 3-cut method. If I just started cutting, let me cut this little one off before we even start. Okay, so if I just cut this off, the weight of this branch is going to, as I'm cutting it, when I get to about 2/3 of the way, the weight of that branch is going to pull down and it's going to peel the bark potentially down the side of this tree. Okay, so what we want to do is put a backstop on that happening. So I will come in here, not quite as much as I'm going to cut off, and I'll just make a back cut right there. Okay, what that little back cut will do is, and then I'm going to come out here. This is a 3-cut method. Okay, one little notch underneath, and then I'm actually going to cut it off initially right here. Okay, that little backstop is going to prevent this thing as it breaks off from tearing the tree. Okay, here it comes. It's starting to pull now, and what I'll do is, the rest of the tree's holding it up a little bit, so I'm going to force it down. This is what would normally happen when you're cutting a branch off like this. Okay, so I want to show you this. That's what would normally happen, and if I hadn't to put that backstop on it, that peel would have continued potentially down here onto a part of the tree that I'm keeping. Okay, once I've removed the weight, yeah, you see that little backstop? Once I've removed the weight, I can go in here and make a clean cut. Okay, make sure, again, we're using sharp tools for these things. I've made a couple cuts in this video with my hand pruners that I probably should have stepped up to a larger tool with, but there you go. Perfectly clean cut at an angle, water's gonna fall off of it. There you go. That's what we'll do on this tree, but I wanted to show you that 3-cut method will prevent you from doing significant damage to the tree. I've got one other main branch and it's causing absolute chaos. You can see this vertical branch and this vertical branch just running up through another one that I'm definitely keeping. So I'm going to track this one down and do the exact same thing that we just did on the other one. Plus this one's actually growing back toward the house, and so I want to prevent that from happening as well. So again, I made my back cut. This is being held up in here. So hold on, I gotta cut those branches off up there. It's being held up. Those branches are so twisted up in there, it's preventing the branch from actually falling off. Okay, that should be helpful. Okay, there you go. It's raining limbs now on us. Okay, all of those crossing branches are now out of it, and we'll just go in here and just make a quick clean cut without the weight on it. Out here in the front garden with the Amelanchier or serviceberry, autumn brilliant serviceberry, we've had an issue with this tree leaning. I've got it staked, but it is trying to lean all the time. There was a maple here at the beginning of this project and it got removed, and the stump was ground, but they had run roots everywhere out here. Just trying to put this sidewalk in over here, putting that lawn in initially, which is about to be something else. And then it doesn't matter where you dig in this front garden, you're gonna find roots from that maple had run everywhere. All of that is starting to settle. And I think that that's what's happening with this tree, is it's trying to lean this direction because all the roots are rotting away over there on that side. And so I pulled it back up, put new, retied it, but it's not in. I have a feeling it's just gonna do the exact same thing. I think I'm gonna have to put another stake over here and physically pull it a little bit more in that direction. I got it straight for now, but every time I do this, it seems like a couple of months later. At first I thought it was the wind, but it's not the wind at all. I think it's the ground. You can actually see the root, when I pull it this direction, roots coming up right here where that side is collapsing in underground, but that's life. This is a rose family plant. Amelanchier is in the Rosaceae. I got my ACA t-shirt on. These are available down below the videos if you're interested in a real plant nerd t-shirt. Only plant nerds are going to know what this actually means when they see it. But this is in the Rosaceae, and a lot of the things in the Rosaceae have leaf spot issues and just in general, disease issues that we all know that roses and things in that plant family get. So when we're pruning something like this, we want to make sure we get it a little more open up in the top. And so while it's still small enough, I want to go up in here. I'll set up a ladder and go through here and make sure that any branch that's heading in toward the middle of the tree, here's a little side branch as an example, it's heading right toward another main branch that's beside it. I'll go ahead and cut them. I'll go ahead and cut them off. Any branch that just seems useless, any branch that's going to end up in my face, I'll cut this off shorter in a minute, but I'm just, as an example, any of these low branches along the side there. Now it's up, it'll be out of our face, and I'll get up in here in the top of it and just thin out any branches that are going to be crossing. Any branch that's coming off another branch and just clearly going to go through the other side, those are the kinds of things I want to cut off of it while I can and while the plant's short enough. That way in the future, I'm not going to have to hire a professional to go up in the top of the tree somewhere. This tree's not going to get that big, but if I had something that was going to grow bigger, I don't want to hire somebody in 20 years to fix the problem that I could have fixed when it was this size. Last year we limbed up the Shasta viburnum into a small tree. So when I'm talking about trees, you can turn your shrubs into trees, and then actual trees all have I have similar thoughts about all of them. And again, this is the best time of year because I can actually come under here and see what's going on with it. Any of these, kind of low branches that I want to continue to lift up the bottom of this into a small tree over time. When you first do it, you're not going to get it completely perfect. In the future, you have to come back in here and clean up some things, clean up some smaller branches. There's a few back here that I'll probably go ahead and cut off, but I only brought my hand pruners under here. The other thing when you start pruning on these things, start pruning on these shrubs like I did last year, you're going to end up with all of these kinds of suckers coming from the bottom of it. So I want to get it back in here every year and cut all these little suckers off the bottom of it. And really, I need to saw this off. This spot where I cut last year quickly in a video and then didn't come back in here and clean it completely up, that's where a lot of these suckers are coming off of. So I need to bring the saw under here and just clean some of this stuff up a little better in general. That's a true root sucker there. But what I'll do is I'll bring the saw under here and I'll cut these off just a bit lower. And that should prevent some of these suckers from coming back as easily next year. But anyway, that's what I'm doing. Just kind of coming under here, giving an investigation, looking for any kind of branches that are crossing, running back into one another, ones that are going to be a problem in the future. This plant actually has quite a few that are doing that. And while I'm under here this morning, I'll take care of those. But that's it. There's some tree maintenance for you, and it's the best time of year to be doing it. Some things will be flowering pretty soon, coming out and flowering. So, like that redbud, you may want to wait and enjoy the flowers on it if it was going to be, you know, flowering. But again, I think it's better to do it when the plant doesn't have as much stress on it while it's not leafed out and it's not the heat of the summer, and you can get in here and visually examine them much easier. So thank you guys for following along and subscribing to the channel. Lots and lots of things going on here in the garden this spring. We're got some new spaces. The foundation now is going to be available for us to do foundation plantings because the house, a lot of the house project is done. We opened up a whole corner back here where we had a greenhouse. That's going to be redesigned and done, and several other projects. So please follow along. Thanks for watching.